So this watercolor exercise is to focus on creating layers and depth and a little more interest so that you don't have just one flat area. We will be working with a light sketch of a tree. You can make your tree into a character if you want to. So let's go through what not to do first. One of the reasons this is a necessary assignment is that too many people, if I said to paint a tree, would revert to a basic palm tree, a basic Christmas tree, or a basic broccoli looking tree that you learn how to do in kindergarten. This is the biggest reason for working on glazing or layering, is that too often when people are starting out painting, they think, okay, I'm just gonna color this all green because trees are green. But trees are multicolored, and we're making a painting out of the inspiration of a tree. We can add colors, we can add things more interesting. So just this basic one color of green, one color of brown for the trunk is what we're getting out of. Instead of doing this, we're gonna work on creating a little bit more of looser tree shapes. So if you look at this, anybody can draw this, honestly. It's a bunch of squiggles. Squiggle here for a trunk, and then just a more free-form kind of squiggly kind of shape. So to draw that squiggly shape, you're going to be using pencil. I'm using a Sharpie, just so you can see it a little bit easier. Make sure your lines are a little uneven, loose, wavy. You can draw the ground, you can throw some grass on there if you want to. Here's my trunk. Notice it's not straight. It's uneven, it's imperfect, as all things in nature are. Be real loose, uneven, and non-symmetrical. So maybe one part of the tree, you know, goes down a little bit farther than the other part, and it's gonna cross in front of the trunk. If you wanna put branches back there, you can. You don't need to. The other thing you can do is put a couple of these almost like layers behind it that disappear behind the trunk, because that's gonna show us that there's part of the tree behind the trunk. Let's talk about the layering. Okay, so first step. This is a step-by-step assignment because it's going to force you into the layering. First thing you have to do is use one of your larger brushes. We are gonna do a little bit of wet on wet, and also when you're trying to cover a big area, then you do wanna get it wet first. So I am gonna just drop a little bit of water. The area that I'm going to paint for the tree, the top part, and I'm also going to dampen the trunk. Okay, it's all right if it's not sopping wet. You can sometimes see if it's a little shiny. The more shiny it is, the more wet it is, and it's okay if it's just damp, because basically it's still going to make the watercolor spread a little bit easier. So right now you're going to take yellow, your brighter color of yellow, and if you need to get a little bit of it on a yogurt lid or the middle of your palette, mix some up ahead of time so we got plenty of it to start with. And you're gonna paint the whole thing yellow. I know, some of you are saying, but trees aren't yellow. We're gonna start with the yellow and layer other colors on top. Have a little bit of variety. There's gonna be some areas that are gonna be darker yellow. It's okay if I leave a little bit of areas of white and grab more paint as needed. Okay, remember if it's white, you can drop in areas of darker. I can think ahead. If I'm making this tree up, I'm also controlling, you know, where the light is hitting it. What part would be lighter, what part would be darker. So remember how I said there's those areas that are gonna be behind. If I wanna make those a little bit darker, I can. But I can also let that drip into this other area too. It's okay, because I'm gonna layer other colors. They're not gonna stay just yellow. So I can do that if I want to, but I still wanna have some of that darker yellow in spots up at the top too. So remember, a tree is gonna be hit with light and shadow. A tree is not a 100% solid object. There's gonna be light filtering through it that are in darker areas. And we're gonna do the trunk too. If you have any of this going on down here, okay, if you made a hill or grassy area, then throw some paint on that part too. All right, we're not done. So now while it is still wet, it's not dripping wet, but it's still wet, you have a palette full of colors. I want you to pick one of your next lightest values. So that might be the other yellow, that's kind of a brownish yellow. It might be the bright green. It might be the bright red. Maybe it's the light blue. Any of those is fine. I'm gonna use kind of a the bright red. I'm gonna grab a little bit of that and mix some up, dilute it a little bit with water so it's not as dark. I'm gonna drop that into a few areas. I am dropping it in while it's wet. I really am not controlling how it's spreading, where it's going. The more water I add, the lighter the area is gonna be. I want a little bit of play, a little bit of movement to it. Don't cover up all the yellow. Pick a few areas. If you want to kind of smooth off the edges like that, you can. Because, you know, I put red on top of yellow. So if I blend the two, the yellow and the red together, what am I going to get? I'm getting an orange, right? So right now I have yellow, light and dark areas of yellow. I have some red, and I have some orange as well. So I can kind of smooth some of that out as I want to. Remember, this area is probably going to be a little darker. But then also, let's get a little bit of that color into our tree trunk. At this point, I should decide what side is going to be the light. And from now on, I'm going to say this is where my sun is, on this side. Okay, you guys kind of see. Here's my light source. You can see this part's already I just automatically, that part was lighter and this part's getting darker. So this side of the tree, remember that cool effect of it's spreading because it's wet. This side of the tree trunk is going to be darker. I can put a little bit of it down here just for making variety. Okay. And now I'm gonna let it dry. You are going to paint the whole thing yellow. Do exactly what I just did. A little bit light, a little bit of dark yellow, whole thing. Then, as it's still slightly damp and slightly wet, it's not, you know, soaking wet, but it's not dry, drop in a different color. I used red, so if you want to kind of follow exactly what I'm doing, drop a little bit of red in, but I also diluted the red to get a much lighter kind of pinkish color. Put a little bit of shadow on the one side of the trunk so there's still a little bit of brightness on the other side, and dropped a little bit down here. So here's a little bit of the other tree with the scary face. Remember that if you decide, you know what, it's a little too much green over here, as long as it's still wet, remember you can grab a paper towel and get rid of it. The only problem then is that I have some really hard edges and I lost my yellow. So if you choose to do that, be careful and get your yellow back, because otherwise that was too much of just the paper color. Remember, we're gonna keep adding to this. This is just layer number 1. We are gonna put some darker values in it later. Don't go too crazy with a really dark yet. Go a little sparingly. Be a little bit more dark on this side again. So I can kind of add a little bit of that to that. A little bit of that. Same thing, just a little bit down here. Break up the monotony. This is tree number 1. Started out with yellow, added in some red. Some areas of lighter, some areas of darker. This is option number 2, started out with yellow, and then dropped in some green. Do this, yellow, and then a secondary color that is still a lighter value. Do not put purple or black or anything. You shouldn't be using black anyways. But don't do your dark blue, don't do your dark purple. So stick to your lighter values, a second lighter color, but one that you can still see some variety on it. Let it dry, take a picture. Okay, then we'll move on to stage 2. We're gonna have a few steps that you have to document. Okay, go and have fun with your tree.